Look, our kid is so adorable. Looks just like me, huh? We've got another one on the way too. Look at my wife. You can tell she's expecting, right? But man, it must be miserable being barren and useless, huh? Breaking up with a dud like you was the best decision I ever made.
With a voice loud enough to echo through the mall, my ex-husband Scott belittled me with words like defective, barren, useless, boasting about his fertile, superior new wife. Although I received sympathetic glances from those around us, at that moment I couldn't care less. With a sigh, I started to share a major fact he was unaware of. Don't you know? My name is Alyssa. I'm a 34-year-old housewife. Scott, my ex-husband, is a 36-year-old office worker, 2 years older than me. I met Scott at a social gathering through mutual friends. Scott is very outgoing, the complete opposite of me. Scott was the one who reached out to me, who was being shy at the gathering. At first, I could only have awkward conversations and I was always in the corner, but thanks to Scott's outgoing personality, I was easily welcomed into the group.
You should have more confidence in yourself, Alyssa. It's a waste. You're so cute,
he would say, casually walking beside me on our way home from drinking parties. I started to have a soft spot for Scott, who was upfront but somehow adorable. Afterwards, we started to see each other more. Our relationship progressed, and we ended up living together and getting married. Loved by my kind husband, our married life was smooth sailing. But even though we were a close couple, we were not able to have children. Therefore, we, who both wanted a child, decided to undergo fertility treatment. Or rather, I decided to undergo fertility treatment. Scott was really kind. He was supportive throughout my fertility treatment.
It's okay, I'm here. Even if we can't have children, I'll always be by your side, Alyssa.
Scott, I'm sorry.
It's not your fault, Alyssa. You don't have to bear it all by yourself. Let's take our time.
At this point, I didn't even think, why just me? And was simply filled with guilt. 3 years have passed since we started the fertility treatment, but there was no sign of us having children. Initially, kind Scott started subtly showing his irritation about not having children. One day, when I told Scott about my cycle and tried to initiate having sex, he said, "I'm tired," and turned his back to me and fell asleep. Since then, he has been making excuses and turning me away. Without even trying, we could not even confirm whether we could get pregnant. And we were facing a crisis in our relationship even before I could get pregnant. Our conversations as a couple also gradually decreased, but Scott started a conversation with me in a cheerful tone for the first time in a long time.
I saw my colleague's child the other day, and he was so cute.
Whether he knew my feelings or not, he started talking about his colleague's child. Oh, really?
I wonder when I can see my own child.
Scott would make sarcastic remarks and blame me like a mother-in-law. Yeah, but recently we haven't been doing anything, so I don't think I have any better chance of conceiving. While feeling guilty, I hesitantly talked back to Scott, but he quickly retorted,
"What? I'm just tired from work. If it was another woman, it would have been done without being forced, haha. Don't you think you failed as a woman if you can't have children? Try putting yourself in my shoes."
I could only stay silent. My heart started to break little by little, and I became afraid to even talk to Scott. A week later, I finished the examination and treatment at the hospital as usual and went home. I decided that this was the last, and when Scott came home, I spoke to him. "Can I talk to you for a moment?"
"What's up?"
The doctor at the hospital said it would be good if you also got checked. So would you like to go together?
What? You think there's a problem with me? There's no way.
But I heard that there aren't many husbands who never get tested. So can you do it? Even when I muster up my courage and ask again.
Are you kidding me? I've been dealing with you who lacks charm as a woman. What more cooperation do you need? Trying to blame me because you can't have children. You're the worst. I just want my own child. It doesn't have to be with you. Do you get it?
Scott criticized me as if saying that I, who cannot have a child, am useless. As a wife? As a woman, I was deemed as a failure. I was at a loss for words from the shock. Housework, fertility treatment, it was not all for me. I had sacrificed a lot for the sake of my existing family, and the family of the future, but when he told me that I lack charm as a woman, my patience, which I had somehow kept up, finally reached its limit. A few days later, Scott casually revealed that he was actually cheating on me.
The other girl is pregnant, and to be honest, there's nothing happening with you, so I'll go with her.
Moreover, it seems that his mistress was a college student and she was pregnant.
Any man would choose to be with a partner that can bear his child.
Without any shame and rather speaking down to me, it was frankly infuriating, but thinking back to those words, it felt like he was declaring his affair, and somehow it made sense. So I easily signed the divorce papers that Scott had filled out on the table and submitted it to the city hall the next day. The divorce was due to infidelity, so I could have claimed damages, but I was still not satisfied with the child issue. I consulted with a lawyer and arranged not to claim damages in exchange for Scott undergoing a fertility test, and decided on getting back at him. A few days later, I reported my decision to my parents at home. Far from being upset, I was more angry and regretted not breaking up with Scott sooner. My time with him was a waste, and my friends encouraged me to make a fresh start. 2 years after the divorce, I ran into my ex-husband, Scott, while shopping at a mall. Scott was with his new wife, a former college student, and their child. Our homes weren't too far apart, and since we live in the countryside, it was expected that we might bump into each other at the mall.
Oh, long time no see. You still doing alright?
Hi. Scott greeted me with a smirk and a condescending attitude, unbecoming of a man who had run off on his wife.
Look, our kid is so adorable. Looks just like me, huh? We've got another one on the way too. Look at my wife. You can tell she's expecting, right? But man, it must be miserable being barren and useless, huh? Breaking up with a dud like you was the best decision I ever made.
Scott proudly bragged about his fertile wife and loudly insulted me, calling me defective, childless, and a failure. His voice echoed throughout the mall. Despite the sympathetic looks from those around us, I didn't care. As I let out a sigh, I began to reveal a critical fact to my ex-husband, as a form of revenge. Well, it's nice that you remarried a wonderful woman and even have a child. Your wife may be competent, but what about you, sir?
What? What are you talking about?
Don't you remember? You took a fertility test in place of damages? The test results came back. And Scott, it turns out you should have been the one getting fertility treatment. I was just fine and fertile.
That's a lie, right? It's some kind of joke, isn't it?
Scott, who had always thought he was fertile, was clearly disturbed. It's true. As I told him this, I calmly whispered into his flustered ear. If you think it's a lie, why don't you do a DNA test on your child? Best of luck building a happy family. Scott, panicking, hurriedly left me and confronted his wife. From a distance, I heard him yelling,
You deceived me.
And such, but I didn't want to cause more of a scene, so I waved my hand and left the place. My heart, which had been clouded for a while after the divorce, felt instantly clear. According to what I heard later, it seemed that the child his wife had given birth to, and the one she was currently pregnant with, were not Scott's. His wife had a main partner, and both children were from that man. However, desiring financial stability, she had chosen to marry Scott without love. Once it was discovered that the children weren't his, Scott was furious and their marriage deteriorated. The wife, who had never loved Scott, effortlessly switched over to the real father of her children. Scott, who was quickly discarded and became lonely, called me almost every day, saying things like,
"You're the only one I love. I was just dazzled by a younger woman, but I'm sober now,"
and requested to remarry me. The fact that he had abandoned me when I needed him most was an undeniable truth. There's no way such words could easily overturn that. I was dumbfounded and blocked his number on my phone. As for me, I had already remarried to a new husband and was blessed with our first child, living a smooth sailing married life at the time of the incident at the mall. I had known my new husband from the time before we were married, as he was from a client company I had been serving at my previous job. We first met in person at a dinner party, but I had been talking to him over the phone a lot for work, so it didn't feel like we were meeting for the first time. Although we had kept in touch, he didn't contact me after I decided to leave my job, and we gradually lost touch. One day, I ran into him in town after several years. He confessed that he had feelings for me when he heard that I was getting married, but didn't say anything. Over time, as we began to meet, I found myself attracted to him, and it didn't take long for us to get married. He accepted everything about me, even all the events that had happened during my previous marriage, saying,
"You can tell me everything. It's okay."
And before we got married, he even came to the hospital with me to take a fertility test. I felt an unprecedented amount of love from him for doing this to make me feel comfortable. I'm truly happy to have been blessed with my first child in life, with a husband who cares for me so much. A few years later, Scott, who had lost contact with me and was still unable to give up, started to hang around my area. Just as I was about to take our child, who had just started walking, out to the park, I spotted Scott.
No way.
He was dumbfounded at the sight of our child. Despite all the times I had told him, Scott, refusing to accept his infertility, was still under the impression that I was the infertile one. Starting from the next day, whenever he saw us, he began to argue that
we were not infertile after all. That child is ours, born before we divorced.
Of course, there's no way that could be true. Considering the child's age, he is undoubtedly the child I had with my new husband. Until now, I had been ignoring Scott, as we didn't have any direct contact, but since he started confronting us, I was honestly at a loss about what to do. My husband then said,
"This child is ours, genuinely. I had a DNA test done because you kept stalking us. Here's the proof, so please stay away from our house."
And he held out the results to Scott, driving him away. I felt guilty for causing trouble to my family because Scott had nothing to do with my current family. But after driving Scott away, my husband silently held me and our child tight. There were no words, but that alone was enough. Once our child started attending daycare, perhaps because Scott couldn't get near our house, he started lurking around the daycare when my husband wasn't around. I was alert, but with the help of the Parents Association and the daycare, we managed to get through it for a while. However, when Scott finally forced his way into the daycare, we immediately reported him, as this act endangered the children, and Scott was taken into police custody. The responding police restrained Scott with practiced ease, but he kept on shouting his unfounded lie.
"That's my child! What's wrong with visiting my own child? Let me go!"
causing confusion around him. Unfortunately, Scott's boss also had a child attending the same daycare as mine, so naturally, this incident became known to him. Since then, Scott was completely ignored at work. He was given no work and just idly spent his days. Despite this, in an attempt to remain at the company, he kept making desperate, unseemly excuses, shouting,
"There's no way I'm infertile. I do have my own child."
Hearing this, it seems he was eventually let go, as anyone would expect. Scott, who had no workplace to go to and no family to return to, went back to his parents' house and lived quietly. However, the neighbors began to spread rumors about the man-child with no children, and it became widely known that he had been involved in a police matter, and he was looked down upon. Without a job and unable to have children, finding a new bride surely wouldn't be easy. The label of being childless was like a boomerang, coming back to deeply pure Scott, leaving a large scar. His parents seemed to keep him confined in their home, perhaps out of concern for the neighbors. There was no longer any possibility of him having a child. As for our family, we breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that Scott was confined at home. Since then, we've been living blissfully, surrounded by my loving husband and child. Children keep parents together, and I firmly believe that no matter what happens to us, our child will keep us connected.
My name is Grace. I'm 63 years old. A few years ago, I lost my husband and now I'm living on my pension. However, it's not a lonely existence. I've been a part of a choir for years and I have many friends, so my life is rather lively. After caring for my husband during his lengthy illness, people tell me I seem to have found a new lease on life now that I'm no longer burdened with that responsibility. I loved my husband dearly and I would have preferred to have him by my side forever. So there are days when I'm struck by a profound sense of loss. But on those days, I talk to his photo on our home altar or sing my favorite songs, remembering how he used to smile and joyfully listen to my stories and songs. Plus, I have a little secret I keep from everyone. My husband left not just our home, but a substantial amount of money as well. I usually get by just fine on my pension, so I don't worry about it much, but knowing I have a nest egg for emergencies provides a certain sense of relief. I was thinking I would continue to live this free and easy life, but then my son and his wife, who had been stationed overseas, contacted me to say they were returning to the US. And what's more, they wanted to live with me after the return. I was delighted at the thought of seeing them face to face rather than just through video calls, and I looked forward to seeing my grandchildren. But there's one thing that has me worried. It was about my daughter-in-law, Mary. On the surface, she seems amiable and efficient, but I have an inexplicable aversion towards her. It feels like she's two-faced, or sometimes she scares me. But when I listen to friends talk badly about my daughter-in-law, I start to think that my feelings towards her stem from the jealousy I feel about her taking my son. Could it be generational prejudice? With a mixture of complex emotions and with the date of our reunion drawing closer, I reluctantly agreed to live with my son and his wife. I could not have imagined what was to come. It's been a while, mother-in-law. Please feel free to ask me anything. I'm planning to take care of you. Excuse me? As she spoke with a smile, I was taken aback. I didn't intend to be a burden to anyone. Or more than that, her saying she'll look after me feels condescending. At that time, I just thought, she doesn't know how to speak properly. But when we started living together, I realized my unease was well-founded. Mary acts very caring in front of others, but when it comes to something as simple as laundry, she behaves oddly. I noticed from the beginning that she seems to dislike mixing my laundry with hers, so I would wash my clothes separately. But I never imagined she would rewash the entire load just because one kitchen towel of mine was mixed in. As she grumbled and put the freshly washed laundry back into the machine, the item she held with such disdain was my kitchen towel. She tossed it aside like it was dirty and exclaimed, "It's going to smell like old woman. This is ridiculous." Another time when Mary wasn't around, I took in everyone's laundry after a brief rain shower. Despite them being almost dry, she rewashed them. "The germs will spread." Tisk tisk, her tongue clicking seemed to be her real nature. I didn't expect a thank you, but this was beyond anything I had imagined. "Do I smell bad by any chance?" I asked my friends, even used a smell detector. My friends laughed it off, and the detector showed much lower values than the standards. "Ugh, gross, don't put your shoes in my shoebox, it's filthy!" One day, Mary was removing my shoes from the shoebox with a pair of cleaning tongs. I didn't remember putting them in there, so my son must have thoughtfully done it for me. The heartwarming gesture from my son only fueled my anger at Mary's actions. "Please stop treating my shoes like they're filthy." When I asked this of her, who had tossed aside my shoes laughing, she turned around with a surprised look on her face. "Oh, mother-in-law. Well, I was just cleaning the shoebox and it looked like there was a bug on your shoes, so I tossed them." How she could come up with such an excuse on the spot is beyond me. "Oh, really? I didn't see any bugs. And you were using cleaning tongs, weren't you?" Maybe it was a mistake?" In the end, Mary played dumb and refused to acknowledge her wrongdoing, but the frustration didn't end there. She refuses to let my grandson eat anything I cook. No matter how hard I try to cook something nice, she rejects it with a smile. "You enjoy it yourself," and never touches it. Not only that, she interferes when my grandson tries to eat my food, always finding a reason to stop him. She freely uses the ingredients I buy without a word, always messing up my plans. She takes the ingredients but refuses the food. It seems she wants to exclude anything I have a hand in. In the end, the only person who enjoys my cooking is my gentle son. I'm sure he would listen if I talked to him about these issues and ask Mary to be more considerate. He's very much like his father, and I can rely on him. But I feel guilty bothering my son who works hard from early morning till late at night with such issues. I'd rather he relaxes when he gets home than be bothered by such things. For now, it seems that Mary has no intention of interfering with my son eating my cooking. Even if it's just my son, if he's happy to eat my cooking, I have to tell myself that's good enough. But, "Don't you dare eat anything your grandmother has made." Hidden from me, Mary was scolding our grandchild. "If you eat that stuff, you'll get sick, remember? Can't you hear me? Don't even think about eating grandmother's germ-ridden meals. I always tell you, don't I?" Stop berating the child for such unreasonable reasons. It's cruel. I had reached the end of my patience. I tell my teary-eyed grandchild to go outside and play and turn to confront Mary. "You always tell him not to eat my food, don't you?" "My mother-in-law, did you hear something?" Mary casually throws out the question. I heard it loud and clear. "Eating my food makes you sick? What do you mean by that stuff? We use the same ingredients from the refrigerator and the same seasonings in the kitchen. It's impossible that it could be harmful." But Mary just giggles. I've been tolerating the old woman's antics till now, but perhaps it's time I threw in the towel. It's heartbreaking how you can't understand how much I'm holding back. Despite trying to keep up appearances till now, it seems she no longer cares about showing her true natures. Mary crosses her arms, sniffs, and humps. "You're an old woman, nearing the end. You should just stay in your room or something and keep quiet. You're so full of energy, always out and about, cooking even when not asked, so selfish, and hoarding your property like a miser. I thought if we lived together, you'd at least share a little with me, but you're totally clueless." Mary frowns and spews one terrible word after another. Not satisfied, she stomps her foot and shouts, "Hey, anyone would understand if they just thought a little. What are you, a numbskull?" Shocked, I stood there. It's true, even my friends comment on my high energy. I love physical activity, not just singing, and often go out for walks. Being out and about is my own business, right? I don't have any expensive hobbies, and I'm not causing any trouble. If my cooking bothers you, I'll stop, but talking about my property is crossing the line. Am I a numbskull? Then what about your remarks? In fact, I'm totally fine with not living together. If you're not happy, you're the one who should leave. Despite using things I've bought without paying me back, when I confront her, Mary laughs loudly. "Look at Granny trying so hard to complain. If you want to kick me out, go ahead. But remember, while you're alive, you'll never see your precious son and grandchild again." With a threatening low voice, Mary leaves with a victorious laughter. Unbelievable. I never thought my daughter-in-law could be so rotten. But I've decided I don't need to hold back anymore. A week later, when I returned from choir practice, I heard Mary's laughter from the living room. Perhaps she was talking on the phone again, bad-mouthing me. You know, our old woman still doesn't kick the bucket. She even went out for choir today, but honestly, it's a relief. She's an eyesore and noisy, but I can't die before her, right? She should hurry up and die whether she ends up in heaven or hell. If only her heart would stop during choir practice. I was deeply disgusted by Mary, who was laughing vulgarly and lounging on the sofa while saying such dreadful things. But she seemed oblivious to my presence and continued to speak disturbing words in her crude laughter. Right? If she's going to disappear, she might as well drop dead outside in one breath. Actually, my husband's in the way too. Like you said, I've been increasing the salt content little by little, even secretly adding it to the old woman's food, but nothing changed. What? It takes years? That's annoying. We can't live together forever at this rate. Pouting, she spoke in a coquettish voice that made me clench my fists. I want to introduce a new daddy to our child soon. For that, I'll fight to seize the inheritance. This was unthinkable. Not only does she see me as an obstacle, this wicked woman was betraying her own husband. I stood beside my lounging daughter-in-law and shouted, "Get out now!" What are you? Startled, Mary tumbled off the sofa, appearing to hit something. So you're back, huh? Attempting to gloss over the situation, I reasserted my command to Mary, who was now forcing a laugh. Leave this place now. Just joking, mother-in-law, no way. Don't make me repeat myself, stand up. At my command, Mary jumped to her feet. Of course she did. I was, after all, the former leader of a renowned choir group. I'd been holding back, practicing my vocal exercises at the riverbank during my walks and completely abstaining at home due to living with my son and wife. It wasn't unreasonable for her to be surprised, but I won't lose to anyone when it comes to lung capacity. Attention! Mary shuddered, probably loathing the idea of following my commands, but as someone who had long served in a leadership role, I knew how to command without leaving room for debate. Exit! Eek! Wide-eyed, Mary, clutching only her smartphone, hastily put on her shoes and bolted out the entrance. But, a formidable foe indeed, a few hours later Mary returned, grinning smugly after apparently seeking help from my son at work. Mother-in-law, have you calmed down? I mean, we were just having a lively conversation about a TV drama with my friends. It's so mean of you to misunderstand. It was astonishing to me that Mary could maintain such audacity even after what had happened just moments ago. However, I couldn't revoke what I'd already declared. I responded icily, "What do you want? I haven't departed for heaven yet, so it's pointless to come and check." No, mother-in-law, that's terrible, such a joke. No, Mary, I understand your true intentions very well. I had a vague idea, but thank you for spelling it out for me. Even with my old spinning head, I understood perfectly. Then, Mary, frustrated by my cold demeanor, started to say, "I told you it's a misunderstanding." I gave Mary a sweet smile in response. "You mean this, that you shared with my son?" What I revealed was a video of Mary on a call a few hours earlier. The audio was perfectly recorded. In choir, we regularly record videos, share them among the members, and discuss improvements. Even beyond the age of 60, such operations are a cinch for me. Mary likely thought an old lady like me couldn't possibly do something like this. Seeing Mary flustered and opening and closing her mouth like a fish, I pounced without mercy. You moved in with us, not just spreading bad rumors about the house owner, but planning to ostracize me. Plus trying to harm my health by oversalting my meals. I knew something was off, but it was your doing, wasn't it? What? No, that's... Shame on you! I shouted at the top of my lungs for the second time that day. What? My son silently handed a divorce paper to Mary, who was now slumped down. My son, usually calm and gentle, becomes silent when he's angry, and that usually indicates an irreversible situation. Before the divorce papers written neatly in his handwriting, Mary began to tremble. No, listen, it's all a misunderstanding, right? I even followed you abroad, and I'm living together with you, right? We have a child, too. Isn't this too much? Hey, listen. Mary desperately clung to my son, but he silently shook off her hand with a heavy sigh, retreated back into his room. Mary, who had nowhere to go, sagged in disappointment. If I left her alone, she would probably freeze up like a rock. To Mary, I said, "It's not like my son was oblivious either. He'd been investigating why his overseas assignment was abruptly shortened and his appraisal downgraded." What? Ignoring the strange noise from Mary, I continued my story. "So you called your affair partner all the way overseas, and you even started commotion at the hotel you were staying at." The head of our business partner saw through it and misunderstood that you were fooling around with men. With his son's approval, it's no surprise you were removed from your position. Mary couldn't refute, as it seemed she remembered something. That misunderstanding has finally been cleared up. It seems there's talk of you getting assigned overseas again. Do you understand? Even without our disagreements, it was already over between you and him, and no matter how kind he is, he wouldn't want to keep someone around who wishes he would disappear quickly. Here, pen and ink. I cut her off sharply and urged Mary to hurry up. Several weeks later, after the divorce proceedings and claims for damages were completed and things had settled down, Mary outrageously showed up at our house in broad daylight. She's really an unrepentant person. Return my child! Seeing Mary yelling with a loudspeaker in front of my gate, I felt dizzy. Everyone, this mother-in-law here falsely accused me of things I didn't do and drove me, the daughter-in-law, out, even took away my son. The yowl of the neighborhood stray cat Miko can be heard along with the loud noise. As Mary continues her crying act, people passing by give her a wry smile. At least please return my son, I painfully gave birth to him. Just as my son had taken my grandson out to the zoo for a change of scenery, to prevent my grandson from being upset, I stood up to silence Mary. What do you think you're doing? Please go home, you're a nuisance. If an outsider saw this, I would probably look like the perpetrator, but I don't care. Oh, mother-in-law, please stop. I can't live without my husband and son. Your pathetic performance is quite a sight, all for naught, you know. I told her with a smile, and Mary suddenly fell silent. Oh, is that so? Say something like that, you know. You'll need care eventually. I recommend trying to win me over while you can. Where does that confidence come from? I, the ever-changing one, don't understand. When I shouted back, I thought Mary would lose her patience and get angry, but instead she mimics crying. You're so mean, mother-in-law. Like the crying woman in a movie, Mary dramatically yells, making me sigh. Right, I did do something terrible to you. I'm sorry. As soon as I said that, Mary abruptly stopped crying and smiled smugly. You finally understand. You have to cherish me. Sure, I really do feel bad. I meant to only share it with my son, but I accidentally, out of habit, sent the video to my choir friends too. I don't think you know, but our choir is large and we have many members in the area. Some of them even have family members working at the police box, you know? Oh, over here. Sorry for the trouble. This is Mary, who was plotting my son and my downfall. Couldn't you take her away? I introduced Mary to the young police officer who rushed over. What? No, why? No, I don't want to go to the police. Stop it! However, there was no way the police would ignore her making such a fuss with a loudspeaker in front of her ex-husband's house. I had consulted with the police box beforehand about such a thing and had also apologized to the neighbors. So she had been laughed at from the start, not even knowing she was the crazy person playing the poor daughter-in-law. Help me! Mary continued her odd little play until the end, but I didn't receive any bad words from my caring neighbors and those who were concerned about my grandson. On the contrary, after my husband passed away, I was able to talk to some people who had become somewhat distant, and I was delighted with the unexpected gain. Afterward, Mary, who ended up penniless instead of inheriting anything, seemed to have been dumped by her lover and was seen loitering around our area a few times. However, she couldn't bear being laughed at and has stopped coming recently. According to rumors, she's now living a lonely life in a small apartment. As for me, I decided to accompany my son and grandson on his overseas assignment. I considered selling the house, but I want to have enjoyable conversations again with the neighbors I've grown fond of, so I'm renting it out. And my grandson seemed to have been afraid of Mary, who was easily irritable like a wicked witch when the two of them were together, and surprisingly, he easily accepted a life without Mary. I want my son to find a kind wife soon, so I felt reluctant to be with them as I might be an obstacle to a new encounter. But since my son and grandson rely on me, it seems that our days of gathering around a delicious table as a trio will continue for a while.
The reservation is confirmed for 7. This person will be seated separately, please. That voice ringing out cheerfully belonged to my mother-in-law, a woman who relishes giving me a hard time. But that's all going to end today. Knowing a secret, I've decided to expose everything in front of all of our relatives. My name is Emily. I'm a 28-year-old chef. After graduating from culinary school, I found work in a well-known Western restaurant where I met my husband, Chris, who was a regular customer. My husband runs a family-owned electronics store in our local area, which has been in his family for 3 generations. Last year, after his father passed away, Chris formally took over as the 3rd generation owner of the store. As for me, I come from a very ordinary household, but my father, mother, and my elder brother are all chefs like me. Perhaps because of that, I've had many opportunities to cook since I was a child, along with my natural talent. I graduated at the top of my class from culinary school. I am rather shy, but cooking has always been my pride and joy. At least that was the case before I married Chris. As soon as we got married, I started living with my mother-in-law. Chris has always lived at home, and his father's death was still recent, so he pleaded with me to move in because he was worried about his mother. I was looking forward to our married life. I knew that since Chris was the eldest son, we would have to live with his mother someday, but I never thought it would happen this soon. I thought I should have told him about my reservations before we got married, but the circumstances were what they were, and I didn't want to be seen as an unpleasant woman. But what's done is done. However, when we started living together, my mother-in-law was very kind at first. She brought me home cream puffs from the bakery I liked, and regarding the household chores, she, being a housewife, would say, "You're working, so it's fine," and took on most of the work herself. She cooked every meal, but I could never get used to her taste. No matter what she cooked, the taste was always too strong. I heard that she was originally from the southern part of the country. I remember seeing on TV or reading somewhere that people from the South prefer salty foods. But that's just one example. Some of my coworkers from the South prefer less salty food. However, my mother-in-law's dish was beyond that level. When she made a stew, it was so black that I couldn't tell what the ingredients were. Of course, when I tasted it, it was like drinking barbecue sauce. She would say, "You need a strong flavor to help you eat your bread, right? Come on, Emily, have some more." I can't. It's too salty. When I glanced at Chris, he said, "Did you make it less salty today?" "Do you notice? I wasn't sure about Emily's preference, so I made it a bit less salty." What? Like this? I was terrified. For a while, we continued to live like this, but my job started to suffer, perhaps because I was constantly eating my mother-in-law's cooking. My tongue was numb and I couldn't taste anything. Luckily, I always had the head chef check my work at the end, and I never got any reprimands. However, feeling this wouldn't do, I started getting up earlier than my mother-in-law, at least for breakfast. That seemed to lessen my troubles during work. Strangely enough, my mother-in-law's attitude toward me turned increasingly frosty. She began to ignore my greetings. Then she started criticizing the food I cooked. It's tasteless. Emily, don't forget to season just because you're busy. What's your game?" "Wait, what? Mother-in-law, I've seasoned it properly. Here, taste it." I had her taste it, but she retorted, "Your seasoning is bland. Can't you even understand that? But adding more would be unhealthy. What's wrong with enjoying good food? Don't get too carried away just because you're good at cooking." With that, she poured in an excessive amount of soy sauce over the dish I had prepared. I never got carried away, and I'm worried about our health here. I had an idea about what triggered this sudden change in my mother-in-law's attitude. It was something that happened at a birthday party for my sister-in-law's daughter at our house. My husband has 2 sisters, both already married and living separately. They are both friendly people who said things like, "If you ever experience any bullying from your mother-in-law, let us know. We'll scold her for you." They've always been very kind to me despite our brief acquaintance. Their husbands are also nice, gentle people. The older sister has a daughter, and we had her 5th birthday party at our house, where I helped mother-in-law with the cooking. The dining table was filled with various dishes. It was quite clear who made what. The party started, and my sister-in-law said, "Our daughter really loves the omelet rice from the restaurant where Emily works. It's a dream come true to have it at home today." I'm happy to hear that. Actually, I'm in charge of making the omelet at work. When I replied, the birthday girl also praised me. The food from the omelet lady is delicious. Watching these conversations, my mother-in-law was not amused. Look, Grandma's stew is also delicious. She tried to get her granddaughter to eat her signature dish, but the little girl protested. No, it hurts my mouth when I eat that. My sister's husbands, being considerate, did eat my mother-in-law's food, but after just a few bites, they asked me, "Sorry, could I get some more water?" Their water glasses were empty after just a few bites. Hey, your seasoning has always been salty, but this is beyond common sense. Maybe Emily could teach you some cooking? When my sister-in-law suggested this jokingly, my mother-in-law got angry and stormed out of the room, refusing to come back. I wished I hadn't cooked, but it was something my mother-in-law had asked me to do and I couldn't do anything about it. The party ended early due to the tense atmosphere. My sister-in-law meant it as a joke, but it would hurt if the food you made was criticized. It must have been the same for my mother-in-law, who prepared the food hoping everyone would enjoy it. That night, I apologized to my mother-in-law. "I'm sorry if I overstepped," to which she replied, "Don't get too comfortable. You're just a freeloader." The next morning, the intense mother-in-law bullying started. My mother-in-law would douse the breakfast I prepared with seasoning without even tasting it. If it was too brutal, it was disposed right in front of me. Naturally, I consulted my husband, Chris, about this, but he just said things like, "Aren't you being too cheeky? You should have just listened to what my mom said." Or, "You're overthinking it," as if it was none of my business. To top it all off, despite us only being married for half a year, Chris started coming home later and later, often not returning until the date had changed. He kept using his work as an excuse, even skipping his niece's birthday party. That's the kind of man he was. Our marital life was falling apart. Of course, I thought about divorcing, but we had only been married for 6 months and I knew it would upset our parents, so I hesitated to take the plunge. Then one day, an event occurred that worsened the situation even further. My mother-in-law slipped on the stairs and injured her leg. My sister-in-law offered to come and help, but incredibly, my mother-in-law chose me. She said, "You're technically the wife, so you should at least do this much. It's outrageous that you're trying to rely on my daughter." From then on, I was being summoned by my mother-in-law even for trivial matters. She started contacting me even during work hours, causing me to ask for time off each time. My coworkers told me it was okay, but I felt guilty and eventually quit my job. My mother-in-law, as if she had been waiting for this moment, laughed at me, saying, "Can't do your proud job anymore. How pitiful." From then on, not only during the day but also at night, I was suddenly summoned by my mother-in-law, and I had no time to rest. Even when I tried to talk to Chris, there were more and more days when he wouldn't come home. He said he was sleeping in his company's office, but I'm sure that was a lie. I had already made up my mind. However, I couldn't just leave without doing anything, so I decided to take revenge on them. Later on, while the three of us were having breakfast, I brought up the topic. "Please divorce me." They both looked surprised, saying, "What are you talking about? We haven't been married for a year yet. It's you who will be laughed at. Are you thinking I'm cheating? Ridiculous." "That's right. You're embarrassing us in public. Emily, you're really out of line." Even though I was made fun of by the two of them, I was not swayed and said, "Chris is not at home. My mother-in-law only knows how to bully her daughter-in-law. Who would want to live in such a house? I will divorce. My mind won't change." Seeing an unusually determined me, the two of them seemed panicked, and Chris said, "We're sorry. I'll try to come home as early as possible. You can even go back to your parents' home for a while, but my mom has this leg issue. I have work. So could you stay here at least until her leg heals?" Chris said that, but it was probably hard for him to apologize, and that was clearly shown on his face. I was not being very mature. I'm sorry. Can't you stay with us a bit longer? Your feelings might change. To which I replied, understood. The moment I said that, they both grinned as if to say, she's easy. They are, indeed, a mother and a son. After that, the bullying stopped and Chris started coming home earlier. But such peaceful times didn't last long. My husband, Chris, started coming home late again, and the harassment from my mother-in-law resumed. My mother-in-law's leg didn't heal at all, yet she frequently went out claiming it to be a hospital visit. Finding this peculiar, I ended up discovering a shocking truth. A few days later, my cell phone was blowing up with calls. The callers were, of course, my mother-in-law and Chris. When I answered the call from Chris, he said, "Hey, where the hell are you? What are you doing leaving my mom like this?" Chris, on the other end of the phone, was pretty furious. I didn't care whether this man was angry or not, so I replied, "Huh? I'm at my parents' house. What's wrong with that? It was you who told me I could go home." "What are you talking about? My mom's leg isn't healed, right?" I heard someone making a ruckus in the background. I recognized the voice. It was my mother-in-law. I said, "Anyway, I'm not going back to that house. Please contact me through a lawyer from now on," and hung up. For a while after that, I enjoyed some peaceful times. During my stay at my parents' house, they made lots of my favorite dishes. I also cooked for my parents, and when my mother said, "Emily's cooking is the best," I couldn't help but shed tears. A few days later, I received a call from a certain person. I was surprised to see the name displayed, because the caller was my detested mother-in-law. It was an apology for her past behavior and an invitation to her birthday party, which was to be held the next week. She insisted that I attend. The venue was a fancy restaurant near the station. The chef at the restaurant had recently changed, a man who had trained in France. It was a place that was becoming popular because you could taste authentic French cuisine. Of course, I was under no obligation to attend, but I thought it would be a good opportunity, so I agreed happily. My mother-in-law was overjoyed and sent me the date and time, insisting that I must come. On the day of my birthday party the following week, Chris and my mother-in-law were already at the entrance of the restaurant. As soon as they saw me, he seemed to be smirking. The members were the same as the last party, 2 couples of sisters-in-law and their little girl, including my mother-in-law, husband, and me. It's a total of 8. The sisters-in-law hadn't been told about the divorce yet, and I was asked to keep it a secret because they intended to tell them at the end of today's meal. In the middle of all of this, the sisters-in-law and their husbands showed up. "Emily, long time no see. You look great, as always." They were kind. Once everyone had arrived, we entered the restaurant. As soon as we entered the restaurant, a waiter greeted us. "Is this a reservation for 7 people?" 7? We're 8, though. While I was thinking that, my mother-in-law loudly exclaimed, "The reservation is correct. It's for 7 people. We would like this person to be seated separately, please." Of course, this person referred to me. As proof, she grabbed my shoulder and pushed me forward. Looking back, the sisters-in-law and their husbands had a puzzled look on their faces, but my husband and mother-in-law were smirking. So this was their plan. How silly. "Emily has a surprise, doesn't she?" said my mother-in-law. Who on earth tells about a surprise at their own birthday party? Right in front of me. "Well then, if she likes surprises so much, I'll happily give her one." "Emily, is that true?" The sisters-in-law looked worried, so I said, "That's right. I was trying to keep it a secret, but my mother-in-law figured it out. Excuse me, is there a vacant seat?" When I asked the waiter, he kindly guided me to his seat. The table was out of sight from my in-laws, which was nice because I didn't have to see those people. After that, the in-laws enjoyed their meal for a while. A kid's meal was being prepared for the sister-in-law's daughter, and she was very happy, saying, "Amazing! This tastes just like my sister's omelet." The sisters-in-law also seemed to enjoy their food, saying it was delicious. For some reason, my mother-in-law was proud, saying, "See, ever since the chef changed, the taste has improved significantly. The meat dishes after this are exquisite," she bragged proudly. In harmony with that, my husband nods in agreement. Next, it was finally time for the meat dish that my mother-in-law had been talking about to be served. A delicious-looking dish was placed in front of my sister-in-law and her husband, but no matter how long we waited, no food was brought to my mother-in-law and husband. Growing impatient, they summoned the waiter and demanded, "What's going on here?" The loudness of my mother-in-law's voice echoed throughout the restaurant, something that seemed out of place in a fancy restaurant. Some customers even grimaced at the commotion. "The chef himself will be bringing your dishes. Please wait a little longer." When the waiter replied in this manner, my mother-in-law responded, "Oh, really? Is it because we frequent this place so much?" She didn't seem completely displeased. "Sorry for the wait." They turned around as if to say, "We've been waiting." But upon seeing who brought their dishes, their eyes bulged out in shock. And no wonder, standing in front of them, clad in a chef's coat, was me. "What? Emily? What are you doing?" "Aha! So that's what a surprise is! Emily, you're full of surprises." While the in-laws said this, my husband and mother-in-law had faces that said, "This was not what we were expecting." I laid out the dishes without caring. "I made this especially for you based on your preferences." The dish placed in front of my mother-in-law was a black lump doused in a plentiful amount of black sauce. Of course, it was thoroughly flavored with soy sauce. "For the final touch, please add this," I said, pouring extra soy sauce on for her. She was shocked and froze on the spot. "Furthermore, we also have a special menu for this customer." I placed a plate in front of my husband, haphazardly lined with batteries ranging from size AA to D. "And for an additional flavor, please use this," I said, placing an entire bottle of soy sauce right in front of him. Because he always harps on about work, I arranged batteries for my husband, who loves his job as an electrician. I even selected the most expensive batteries sold at other electronic stores, so I expect some gratitude. Seeing this, my nieces were laughing hard. My sister-in-law and her husband had looks on their faces that said, "Isn't this a bit too much?" My mother-in-law and husband, with red faces, yelled, "You're making fools of us and this restaurant for allowing such a thing. Call the manager." As my husband said this, the manager appeared and said, "That would be me." "What the hell are you thinking? We are the customers here. We'll sue you." Hearing that, the manager replied simply, "Is that so? In that case, we'll be suing you two for disrupting our business." "Huh?" was their response. It seems that the two of them frequently patronized this restaurant and had always acted arrogantly towards the staff. They had a reputation for nitpicking things like, "This is too bland," or "This has no flavor," and never considered the inconvenience they were causing other customers. They were well known as troublesome complainers. "We've tolerated it until now because you're family, but it seems we'll finally be able to distance ourselves. We won't hold back, right, Emily?" "Yeah, big brother." Upon hearing this, the two of them looked surprised and turned their gazes towards us. Actually, this restaurant has been managed by my brother for some time now. My brother works in France, and he couldn't make it back home when I got married due to his busy schedule. Although he sent his congratulations, my mother-in-law and my husband, Bob, had never met him. Since my brother had been sent family photos, he knew what mother-in-law and Bob looked like. "I apologize for not being able to attend your wedding. I wanted to reach out multiple times, but you both always had company." Upon hearing this, their faces turned pale. Feeling the conversation was getting long, my sisters-in-law told their husbands to head home first, then suggested, "Should we dig into this further?" They were smiling, but their eyes weren't. Seeing the usually cheerful two of them looking like that, it gave me a bit of a chill. "It's just business. You know, the old guys in the main street, they like these trendy places nowadays." Chris uttered this, and as he did, a waiter approached and handed over an earring, saying, "Your guest left this behind last time." "You're dining with men who wear earrings, isn't that sketchy?" my sister-in-law commented. I couldn't help but laugh. "No, sister-in-law, this man has been having an affair with a woman who works at a florist across his shop." Chris's face turned ghostly pale. He looked at me as if asking how I knew, but I had hired a private investigator some time ago. My intuition was correct. Chris had been meeting the woman almost every day after work. This restaurant seemed to be her favorite, and they visited almost every week. Photos of them entering a hotel together and other evidences were plentiful. "I'm serious about her. Marrying you was a mistake. I'll gladly divorce you." Chris, who had been reluctant about divorce, had suddenly changed his stance. Of course, this was quite convenient for me, who wanted a divorce as soon as possible. "Sure, but I'll be claiming alimony, so make sure to pay." "I just landed a big contract recently. I'll gladly pay," he laughed. "That's good to hear. Then about you, mother-in-law." Up until then, my mother-in-law, who had been silent, shivered. She was not as much of a regular here as Chris, but she was a regular nonetheless. "But I'm already a widow. It doesn't matter." Upon hearing her say this, I decided to share another fact. "I had the PI look into you as well, mother-in-law. Your relationship with your partner seems to be going on for about 5 years. But wait, didn't father-in-law pass away just last year?" "What?" Upon hearing this, my sisters-in-law glared at their mother in anger. No surprise there, the two sisters-in-law were closer to their late father than their mother. Learning the truth, they were furious. I was also surprised, but it seemed strange how detailed the PI was about my mother-in-law. Upon asking, it turns out my father-in-law also hired the same investigator. "You've been lying about Dad all along, and Chris, you're cheating on Emily. Are you two out of your minds?" The sisters-in-law's anger showed no signs of cooling down. Seeing that it was disturbing other customers, we decided to disperse for the day and regroup at the in-laws' house another day. That day, I said goodbye to my brother and the staff with high fives. A few days later, the divorce papers were filled out in the presence of my two sisters-in-law. My husband, completely unapologetic, was saying things like, "Well, just don't regret it, huh?" "Really, despite my poor mobility, I ended up with such an outrageous wife," she grumbled. Tired of his incessant complaints, I shouted, "Watch your step, mother-in-law," and she jumped, exclaiming, "What?" Indeed, her leg was perfectly healed. Even though it was healed, she continued to pretend it was painful just to torment me. Such a spiteful woman she was. But to me, she was now nothing more than a stranger. And so, my married life ended in less than a year. I didn't regret it at all. Later, alimony for both my ex-husband and the woman was deposited into my account. Since it was deposited simultaneously, I assume my husband paid for the woman's portion too. But that's beside the point. As for the pair afterwards, despite going into debt to pay the alimony, my husband was promptly dumped after the divorce. I later learned from my sister-in-law that the woman was infamous in her hometown as a home wrecker. My ex-husband had bragged about landing a big contract, but as it turns out, the day we were at the restaurant, there were mostly regular customers. And upon us leaving the restaurant after having to deal with the complaining couple, applause erupted, my brother told me. By the way, I was told by my brother that there were only reservations of 7, so I figured there was no place for me to begin with, which is why I had thought of this plan. Of course, they are now banned from the restaurant. Word of their misconduct had spread, and it seems they lost that big contract. They deserve it, I suppose. It's an electronics store that seems to run on trust. Prospering in the future will likely be difficult. As for my mother-in-law, she was dumped too, and on top of that, when she went to the hospital due to poor health, it was found that her long-term dietary habits were to blame. and that even with treatment, her body would never return to normal. She deserves this as well. As for me, I've returned to work at the Western-style restaurant I used to work at. Despite the trouble I had caused, they warmly welcomed me back. Hey, omelet lady! My sisters-in-law still frequently visit the restaurant. They've cut ties with their mother and brother since that incident. They couldn't forgive them for neglecting me, who they had treated like a little sister and deceived their father the whole time. And they have no intention of forgiving them in the future. Despite everything, I'm happiest when I'm cooking. I'm the happiest I've ever been right now.
It's been a decade since we tied the knot. Every year, we've made a point of visiting my in-laws' place during the Christmas holidays. As it does every year, that time is fast approaching again. The truth is, every year's Christmas is a severe strain for me. Yes, that's right. I've been having major issues with my mother-in-law, and just the thought of it weighs me down. As December draws near, I feel my spirits sink lower and lower. Every year, I rack my brains, wondering if there isn't some way out of this. My name is Lisa. I fell in love with my husband at work, and we've been married for 10 years now. I knew my mother-in-law was a bit of a busybody when we went to announce our engagement, but I never thought things would come to this. I suppose I should have been more level-headed, but at the time, I was so smitten with Paul that I didn't see the sign. I remember it as if it were yesterday. I splurged on famous chocolate as a gift, but my mother-in-law's first words were, "You shouldn't have bothered. I hate chocolate. You were so rude to give me what I don't like." Caught off guard by her words, all I could say was, "I'm sorry. One can tell a lot about you from a simple gift. I wonder if you can get along well with Paul," she said. After 3 years of marriage, I finally got pregnant and I gave birth. My mother-in-law was making a fuss about how useless I was as a wife for giving birth to a girl. Her words hit me hard as I was dealing with my first childbirth. And since then, problems with my mother-in-law only got worse. "Lisa, why didn't you give birth to a boy who will be the heir? We don't need a girl. Please give birth to a boy. If you can't do that, you're disqualified as a wife." Paul should have married a younger wife. A wife older than her husband is the worst. My mother-in-law would say things like that without considering my feelings. Of course, I talked to Paul about it, but he had no intention of defending me. "Don't take everything she says so seriously," he would say, which was just horrible. Each time, I would confide in Sarah, my sister-in-law. I've been getting along well with her since the first time I was dating Paul. And since I'm an only child, I saw her like a real sister. But my mother-in-law would call me every day asking if I had a child yet. I couldn't stand being treated as if my daughter was unwanted. And then my mother-in-law started asking me to send her money behind Paul's back because she was having a hard time. I couldn't ignore the fact that my mother-in-law was in trouble. And then, 2 years after the birth of my daughter, I was blessed with a second child. I thought that if it was a boy this time, I wouldn't be criticized, and I was on tender hooks until I found out the sex of the baby. But when I went for a checkup, the doctor told me it was a girl, and I was at a loss for words. And so began the phone onslaught from my mother-in-law again. "Lisa, don't you know the sex of the baby yet?" "I'm sorry, I don't know yet." "Modern hospitals should be able to tell. There's no way they can't." "I'll let you know as soon as I find out." "I don't want another girl. Sorry." I was so upset and complained to my sister-in-law. And so I gave birth without revealing the sex of the baby. When they told me, "Congratulations, it's a girl," I could only imagine my mother-in-law's demonic face, and all I could do was laugh. And my mother-in-law never once showed up at the hospital. But it was all the better for me. My mother lives 20 minutes away by car, and I had left my older child with her for the birth. My mother brought my daughter to the hospital, and we were happy to have a new family member without anyone complaining. I went back to my parents' house with my mother and my older child for a month. The month I spent relaxing with my mother at home was a time of nostalgia and relief. And when my younger child's 1-month checkup was over, I returned home, but I hadn't heard a thing from my mother-in-law. And then, several months passed, and the usual Christmas holidays were upon us. I was spending every day with a heavy heart, but I couldn't avoid it, and I thought she might be in a better mood once she saw her grandchildren. So I decided to bring a famous cake this time. And on the day, Paul drove us to our usual steak restaurant. As I wondered what would be said, my heart was pounding. When we entered the reserved private room, my in-laws were already there. Despite her grumpy demeanor, the arrival of my brother-in-law and his wife soon had the meal off to a lively start. Of course, the conversation turned to my younger child, and everyone was excited, but I noticed that my mother-in-law's face was tense. I sensed something was wrong and tried to change the subject when... "You can't even give birth to a boy? You're a useless wife! You're not part of this family!" My mother-in-law suddenly started saying terrible things. And then she deliberately knocked over the tea that was in front of her. "Oh, I'm sorry. If your daughter gets a burn on her face, no one will know she's a girl." Suddenly, I was overcome with rage. My mother-in-law despised me for not giving birth to a boy. During a meal with my in-laws, the moment my mother-in-law said, "What a complete letdown of a woman!" a plate suddenly flew from where my father-in-law was sitting. What are you doing?" I was just shocked. I couldn't believe the usually mild-mannered father-in-law would throw a plate. This time, it seemed like my father-in-law turned the table on mother-in-law, which I must admit felt good. Next, my father-in-law yelled, "Enough! What right do you have to say such things? The child born has no sin. The real letdown of a woman is you." "What are you talking about? Don't joke around. A wife who can't give birth to a boy is like garbage. Such an insolent woman." "What are you, who only gave birth to boys? I wanted a girl, but you know, the child that was born has no sin. It doesn't matter if it's a girl or a boy." "There's no way it doesn't matter. Boy! Boy, boy, boy! Only boys have value. Worthless wife, worthless granddaughter, hopeless. See, you admit it. So you have nothing to say." I was holding back my tears, but at the moment when I was about to break down with a sound, "You! Enough already! Lisa has given birth to 2 children. What more do you want? They're not your children. You don't help raise them. You just demand a boy out of your own selfishness. If you want a boy that much, why don't you give birth yourself? Of course, that's impossible for an old woman like you." "Hey, stop it now. What you've been doing isn't just bullying. Even when you got an expensive chocolate, you said, 'I hate chocolate,' even though you can't afford to buy such a chocolate. When will you have a child? I don't need a girl. You're useless as a wife. Serve me. Send me money. Get a job and make money. You're getting carried away, you stupid-looking old woman." Then my brother-in-law clapped his hands, and after him, Paul also started clapping. Huh? What's going on? I didn't understand anything. "I'm a man, so I didn't get involved, but I'm surprised. My real mother is a professional daughter-in-law bully." "Huh? What are you talking about? I don't understand. Who's bullying daughter-in-law?" "You. There's no one else who would do that. I was almost abandoned by my beloved wife." "Huh? Men are insensitive and useless, brother. Absolutely. In comparison, women's intuition is terrifyingly accurate. You can't cheat." "Hey, what are you saying?" "It's obviously a joke, Sarah. Take over." "Roger? What? Are you guys some kind of fraudulent group? What do you think of your real mother?" "What do you mean, fraudulent group? You're talking about yourself." "What? Why me? You know a man named Mr. Brown, right?" "Huh? I don't know such a person. What are you talking about?" My mother-in-law was clearly flustered. She was trying hard to change the subject with an innocent look. Then, my sister-in-law continued the conversation. "What's this daughter-in-law bullying circle?" "Huh? I don't know. I don't know such a thing. Catch old mother-in-laws and invite them to the circle. Teach the members your invited techniques, traps, and ways to bully their daughter-in-laws. Every week you hold seminars and have a good time with the outrageous old ladies. You've been practicing the daughter-in-law bullying. You're a shitty mother-in-law. Invited by Mr. Brown, you were helping and aiding. Mr. Brown's aim was to earn money by holding seminars, but Mr. Brown was short of funds and was extorting you. You were extorting Lisa for money every month. When the money didn't come in as you expected, you vented your frustration on Mr. Brown and practiced daughter-in-law bullying. Do you think such a rotten, shitty mother-in-law will be forgiven? Mother-in-law? What does this mean? That's not true! Everything Sarah is saying is a lie. I want you to stop! Then what's this? My sister-in-law pulled out an envelope from her bag and showed the photo, and my mother-in-law's eyes were wide with surprise. This is a photo from your seminar, right? You're looking pretty friendly with Mr. Brown. And what's this? Walking arm in arm is strange, isn't it? This is unacceptable. I was confused by this unexpected event, but now I understand why you've been bullying Lisa. My wife is too strong-willed. You can't win against her. Stop joking around. I didn't know anything and let it slide, but it won't go unpunished. Misunderstanding! Misunderstanding. Enough. Let's stop. I haven't done anything. After all, you're just misunderstanding and overreacting. It's natural to have a few close friends. Then it happened. From the next private room, the voices of a few women laughing and talking could be heard. Hey, do you remember? Patricia from the 3rd District who was in the same class at elementary school? Ah, you mean that mean devil Patricia. I heard she got caught by a man and is giving him all her money. And apparently that man has started a mother-in-law harassment circle, where he invites mothers-in-law who want to harass their daughters-in-law and hold seminars or something. Oh, I know! Harassing her daughter-in-law? That's just the kind of thing that devil Patricia would do. And she's apparently investing money every month because the guy is short of money. She seems to be told that he'll return the money tenfold, but that's definitely impossible. That man has a family, and his daughter is disabled and living in a wheelchair. So she's being fooled by such a man and might destroy her own family? It's a wonder that her family hasn't collapsed so far. The face of the mother-in-law rapidly turned pale and stiffened. And then the father-in-law opened his mouth. Your life is over. What are you talking about? I've come this far without knowing what kind of woman you are. All the terrible things you've done to Lisa were simply because you are foolish as a person. Lisa, I am truly sorry. I apologize. It's not your fault. Please don't apologize. What? It sounds like I'm the one who's wrong. Just stop it! I haven't said anything wrong, and I've been complaining because my daughter-in-law isn't good enough. Don't blame me. She's such a terrible daughter-in-law after all. The terrible daughter-in-law is you. You got married, hiding everything from me, then demanded money from the kids when they became independent and give it to other men. You are a scammer, aren't you? A scammer? The fact that I have been serving you until now is true. It's a joke to be called a scammer for that. You've been serving me? What on earth have you done for me? I've been taking my shirts and suits to the dry cleaners myself and mostly have dinner outside, only returning home to sleep. That's right, when we were little, Mom wasn't at home and dinner was like snacks or sweet buns. We always wondered where she was going. What are you talking about? Exactly. We were told not to tell Dad anything. We thought it was strange from that time. She didn't even come to school for portfolio days or interviews. When I was taking high school entrance exams, the only person who helped me was my teacher. I was in trouble because I didn't know which school to go to. I was moved when I ate good, homemade food for the first time after getting married. Supermarket side dishes were a luxury. How could a mother like that blame Lisa? Lisa is a hardworking mother and a good wife. Don't keep quiet. Say something. You can't say anything. You thought what you've been doing wasn't found out, so you got carried away. You had no idea that the conversation would turn into this today. I wouldn't keep quiet about this. I've been talking to my father-in-law for a long time. What did you say? You have to leave this house today. We're getting divorced. Divorce? Why is this happening? It can't be helped because Lisa is my child, right? They're so close they fight. Don't mess with me. Are you going to play me more? I also knew that you had been cheating on me since your 20s, but I kept quiet because of the children. That's why you can't get rid of the habit of cheating. You're walking arm in arm with a friend? I've never seen such a friend. It's over. Your life ends here. You can do whatever you want from now on. Wow, I didn't expect that. So that's why she wasn't at home. It's impossible not to have time to make dinner for your children. It's funny that such a person was pretending to be a good mother-in-law and complaining. It's not a joke. I've sold our house and all that's left is to submit the divorce papers. I've been fooled for a long time. Now I can live my own life, properly. You sold the house? What are you doing without my permission? I won't get divorced. No matter what you say, it's too late. I don't think I'll ever see you again. If you have any complaints, please contact my lawyer. Huh? What will happen to me from now on? I don't have a house. I don't have any money. How am I supposed to live? Why are you taking away my happiness at this age? You're the one who kept taking away Lisa's happiness. Before, you took it from me too. It's just that it's come back to you. Please rethink. I admit I was wrong, but please don't divorce me. Don't make me laugh at this point. It's decided. You have to leave the house tomorrow. I've warned you. The divorce is decided, so I'll go home now. Me too. My father-in-law had been pretending not to know about my mother-in-law's cheating habits since long ago. Thinking about my father-in-law's feelings made my heart ache. I can't imagine how much he loves his children. And finding out that he had been planning this divorce all along, I felt a bit relieved. I wanted my gentle father-in-law to lead a free life. I had always thought that when I saw my in-laws. Age has no bearing on life's choices, because my father-in-law should have a life of his own, and I was filled with gratitude towards my sister-in-law who helped me. I never thought she would consider so much for me. It made me realize once again how wonderful a family can be. I wanted to have a good relationship with my father-in-law in the future, so I wished to live with him. And I wanted him to interact with my daughter, his grandchild, who he hasn't seen much until now. It's a family restart from this age, but I want to make it the best life. When my father-in-law called me Lisa, I truly felt like we were family.